Our goal in this problem is to find where f of x will equal negative 6. So to start, I would look at a graph before you start to solve this algebraically. And so this purple function is f of x. You can see that we have a discontinuity at 3, which our graph verifies that we have an asymptote at x equals 3. I want to know when f of x equals negative 6, so I also graph the line y equals negative 6. And what graphing tells us is that we're going to have two answers, one negative, one positive. The graph probably isn't accurate enough to guess what our answers are, so that's why we're going to solve this algebraically. It's a good idea to start by listing any domain restrictions, and I know that x will never equal positive 3. And to solve this algebraically, I'm going to start by setting my function f of x equal to negative 6. When we're solving fractional equations like this, where we have a large rational function, our goal is going to be to get rid of our denominator. And so to get rid of an x minus 3 in the denominator, I'm going to do the exact opposite and multiply by an x minus 3, so these will cancel. You need to keep in mind if you multiply one side by x minus 3, you also need to multiply the other side by the x minus 3. So then on the left side, since my denominator is canceled, I'm left with x squared minus 4x minus 1, and that will be equal to a negative 6x plus 18. This equation now becomes a little bit more familiar to us, and I can see that it's going to be a quadratic equation, so I'm going to move everything to one side. I will be left with an x squared plus 2x minus 19, and that will be equal to 0. Solving quadratic equations, we first want to try and factor, but I know that 19 is prime, so that's not going to get me to a 2, so I'm going to use the quadratic formula. X will equal negative b, so negative 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a, so 2 times 1. Okay, so from here I have my calculator, and I know that I'm going to get a positive 80 underneath my radical. So I will have a negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 80, all divided by 2. I'm going to go ahead and type both of these answers into my calculator. I would hit enter before dividing by 2. And so my first answer, I get x to be an approximate 3.472. My other answer, I need to take negative 2 minus the square root of 80. Again, I would hit enter, then divide 2, and I get a negative 5.472. From here, I would double check our graphs to make sure these answers are reasonable. Negative 5.4 roughly, that does match what we see on the graph. Positive 3.47, again, that does match what we see on the graph. So these two answers would be the solution to where f of x will equal negative 6.